What a great honor it is to have Ken Dychtwald here at the Century Summit. So a little bit of a confession. So I asked plaintively all the moderators to keep their introductions of the speakers, people have their bios, to be very brief. And then I find myself sort of hoisted on my own petard. How do I introduce Ken Dychtwald in a sentence? I thought this may be the beauty of conjunctions. I can really carry on, but I'm just going to give a very short thing and then go right into the conversation. So it's just an extraordinary honor to introduce Ken. He's one of the foremost thinkers on aging in the US and the world, the founder and CEO of AgeWave, and the author of 19 important books on aging. I don't know where you find time for 19 books, but let's just start off. I actually want to keep the conversation going from the last panel, which I thought was really interesting and a good balance between big ideas, but also sort of a little bit of a cold slap about some of the realities that people face. I want to ask you about sort of what your reaction is a little bit to Aurora. She's talking about some of the challenges that younger people face, high student debts, challenges with the saving system. How do you react to what you heard from her and from the other panelists about the challenges of funding this longer life that you've written about for so many years?
Well, give me some guidance. Do you want me to be kind and patrician, or do you want me to?
No, not at all.
Off?
Yeah. Just
so
what do you think?
Set the stage, and then I'll ask a question, and then I'm going to answer your question. Throughout 99% of human history, we're told by medical anthropologists, the average life expectancy was under 18. So it's not just that the 20th century was dramatic. The 19th century saw a lift as well. And this is new. This has never happened before. We have never had a world, never on planet Earth, have people gotten up in the morning and said, I might live 80 or 90 or 100 years. The chairs you're sitting on were designed for the body of a 22-year-old man. You may not realize that. The lights we use are in our public environments are designed for the eyes of the young. The auditory range in these systems were not designed for older people. The length of time it takes for the traffic lights to change were geared to the swift pattern of young people. Education. You flit around this campus, and notwithstanding the several examples where older people are pursuing education throughout their lives, you see young people. That was somebody's idea. You learn one time, and that lasts your lifetime. Is one night when you're 19 and either stoned or drunk, you make a decision about what you're going to do for the next 50 years when you don't have any clue what life actually is yet. So we're living in a moment in time where everything about these subjects is new. I started working in the field of aging in 1974, so I'm finishing my 49th year. And I've watched lots of interesting people come and go, interesting ideas come and go. We've had half the Fortune 500 as clients, many governments, leaders of nations have sought my company or me out. Like, okay, how do we do this? I remember sitting with Lee Kuan Yew 30 years ago, creating the master plan for Singapore. Then I'm going to ask a question, and then I'm going to answer your question. By standing up, which is also good exercise, how many of you would like to live to 100? Please stand up. And if I qualify the question and say, no matter what, now turn to the person sitting next to you, even if you don't know them or like them or have anything in common with them, and explain why so few people are standing once the no matter what came in there. What were the no matter whats? What would your what would yours be?
Bad health, of course. Yeah, right. I assume that's what everyone's saying.
And cognitive health.
Yeah.
People don't want to be alive if their mind is gone. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to answer the question.
It worked again. It's like magic.
We're programmed. What did I think of the last panel? Early in COVID, there was a news broadcast that there was a young girl that got raped on a subway in Philadelphia, which is horrible. And everybody on the train watched. Nobody did anything. And I've been plagued by that recollection. I've now watched 49 years of people writing white papers and having discussions about this sliver of a project or that sliver of a project, or the financial side or the health side or the purpose side or the relationship side or the community side. There doesn't seem to be any kind of master agenda, master plan that's hopeful, that draws people towards it. And I saw that on the last panel. And the people on the last panel are the best there are. Those are extraordinary human beings you just witnessed. But if I were not highly educated with multiple degrees, would I understand what was just said? I don't know. When I turned 65, and I was always the youngest guy at the table. Now I'm 73. How many people are older than me? Okay, just 5 or 6.
Yeah.
When I was 65 and I started getting Medicare, I would get a document once a month, and the document on the top left would say, "This is your Medicare bill." And on the upper right, it said, "This is not a bill." And I'm a pretty clever guy,
Couldn't puzzle that one out.
I got a note yesterday from an insurance plan that I never signed up for, telling me how to consolidate and do things online. And it's like, I don't even know who they are. And then there's this not-for-profit AARP, with great respect, Deb, but just to liven up the discussion, to make around $400 million on your programs and your membership, but over $1 billion on healthcare and be a not-for-profit. Not sure I understand that. What is the purpose of our healthcare system? Is it to make certain organizations money, or is it to create long-lived, healthy, productive, turned-on people? So what are the big issues? Not the small issues. And I'm so exhausted of hearing people saying, we're working on, or we need to work on, or we need to look at, or why don't we take some time and think about this sliver program or that sliver program? Why is there not a presidential debate about the challenges and opportunities of becoming the first long-lived society in the history of Earth? And how come?
I can answer that.
Yeah, you got old people running for office.
Yeah, I don't think they want to remind it. Yeah.
A, they don't want to remind people of their age, and B, old people vote disproportionately. And that's a corruption of democracy. Doesn't get talked about. It should be a question right at the beginning, that if you want to win an office in this country, you need to not upset older people because they vote in higher percentages than any other group. And so where I sit, and it may be my age, but I've sort of always been obnoxious. It's like, where's the big ideas? Where are the, not 1,500 big ideas, but where are the 5 or 7 or 8 big ideas that are at the confluence? We don't organize our lives. How many of you said you didn't want to live to 100 if you didn't have your health or your cognitive health? Raise your hands. Okay, so that was no mention of money. They're confluent. They're all interacting. And we figured something out the other day where this is one of the strangest things. I mean, these are things that we all know, or we ought to know, that if you're a woman and you're partnered with a man, the man is 2.5 years older than you. Now that might change. And women live about 5 years longer than men. The wage gap that Ann referred to, and everything that Ann and Larry Fink and BlackRock says, listen to, because they are the lead of the field. You take that 82 cents and run it out over a lifetime, it's $410,000. That's a lot of money. You add to that career interruptions, time off for caregiving, missed escalations, less benefits, so on. And it's a $1.1 million differential between a man and a woman. And yet the financial industry, there's always a woman, my wife does this, she's written books on it, who talk about we need to pay more attention to women. And then you still see the field is 80% men. And we have a healthcare industry. And some of you may know this. I had dinner with Terry Fulmer last night, who is the great one. We hadn't seen each other for 46 years, I think, although we're doing things together. We have this delusion in America, Ken, and I hold NPR to blame. When you were running it, you did a great job
I
in
accept the blame.
elevating it as an enterprise, but we have this delusion that we're really good at healthcare. There are 39 countries in this world that live longer than we do, their lifespan.
Yeah.
39. But when you look at health span, which in a dream world, they would match. We would match our health spans and our wealth spans and our brain spans to our lifespans. So we'd live, whether it's 100 or 110 or 120 years, and then, you know, like Oliver Wendell Holmes, one Hochet, we would all disintegrate. We are 68th in the world with regard to health span. Now, there's a word that you hear from time to time that can be used to describe that. Shitty. So here we've got the most powerful people on this subject, and what Laura has done by creating a longevity center begins to lean towards the new language. But where are the people forcing this into the White House? Where are the people forcing these issues?
Well, let me ask, can I ask you about this? Because so Gene Sturl and Dan Kramen wrote an op-ed in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, and this is get to sort of the political challenge and sort of the sort of social challenge around this. And it was titled, "For the Good of the Country, Older Americans Should Work More and Take Less." And it was around Social Security and Medicare, and probably most people would agree with the math of the situation. And I thought it was a well-reasoned and important article. And then I read the comments, 3,500 comments from older people telling them to stuff it. I think, and so for me, the big takeaway was no politician wants to deal with this if we can't persuade older Americans to think differently about the community they live in. I'm curious about sort of that challenge of bringing people along with this, with a different vision of longer
So
life.
it's 1995. You were probably in junior high school then.
I wish. No,
No, I know when you were born. And President Clinton spoke in the afternoon at the White House Conference on Aging, and then it was Al Gore and me. And I'm on the podium, and I'm sitting next to Bob Butler, who was my dear friend and my mentor. And Bob, right before I go to speak, Bob pulls me outside into this back room. And he says, "We got a serious problem. We got 3,000 delegates here, mostly seniors, as older people used to be called. And I've seen the preliminary votes, and they're pretty well voting within their own time horizon. So benefits that they will see in their life, they're voting for, but things like more research for Alzheimer's disease and education for kids and college loan, no."
Yeah. So
I went semi-berserk in my speech, and I got Alzheimer's funding moved up to number 3 from number 27 or something like that. But I haven't lost that moment, which is that our older population, unfortunately, and there was a mention about time affluence, which is a phrase I actually coined. In the next 20 years, the boomers will have 3.9 trillion hours of free time. Now, if we came from another planet and we started there, you've got a generation of people with the highest levels of education and intention and intelligence and worldliness, and they've got 3.9 trillion hours, and worldwide it's 50 trillion hours.
I can finally catch up on my Netflix.
We haven't tasked them with anything.
Yeah.
We haven't tasked them with anything, which is sort of It's like a bad Kurt Vonnegut story. And not only that, only 24% of our 70 million retirees volunteer at all. And we know from research that people who volunteer are healthier, live longer, have better state of mind, and are more connected. And even worse than that, the average retiree in America watches 47 hours of television a week. So I saw that article and I thought that took some courage, because it's true. We have modeled our notion of life based on the way it was maybe 50 years ago, where you'd work for like crazy and then you'd have a few years of retirement. And so now that we're living longer, we just tag some more old age on the end of our lives. And older people aren't really, I mean, it is the highest form of ageism to not expect anything of an entire stage of life. And Laura has done some of the most brilliant work, both in battering that notion and talking about, you know, the U-curve of happiness, and done at Yale also, and also people like Mark Friedman. Mark, you're in the room somewhere, I know. There you are. Getting us thinking about the incredible resource. It's the only natural growing resource on Earth right now. 2/3 of all the people who've ever lived past 65 in the entire history of the world are alive today. So yes, I don't think people should necessarily be, you know, hit over the head and forced to do unpleasant labor. But I do believe that as our lives get a bit longer and work becomes increasingly non-physical, that a few more years of work, and older people, you know, we've done studies now in countries all over the world, and we've done about 100,000 respondents, we being AgeWave, and all of our studies that we've done in partnership with Edward Jones or Merrill or Chuck Schwab or Allianz or HSBC and all over the world are free on our website. It's at agewave.com. What we've seen is that people say that they'd like to keep working, they just don't want to work as hard or as often. So if you can give me a 3-day-a-week assignment, or 2 months a year, or 4 hours a week, count me in. So yeah, I think older people should work longer. And I also think last week it came out that people over 65 are now the wealthiest segment in America. So we modeled things in the 1930s when you had 1/3 of the elderly were impoverished, and there was a 25% unemployment level. So it made sense to try to move old people out of the workforce to create a pipeline for young people so that they could get going with their lives. But now we've got worker shortages. We've got ageism in hiring practices. We've got a lot of older people who could use some refresher courses on how to use technology. But yes, I would, and this is all, the reason I created AgeWave just under 40 years ago was that I didn't want to have to answer to a government or to an employer or to a university. People think it was so that I could make a lot of money, which I have. Lost it all and then made more back. But it was so that I could think and speak my mind about what I think is absolutely the most interesting subject on Earth, which is making sense of what do we do if we're going to be living 80 or 90 or 100-year lives? How do we match our health spans to our lifespans? How do we create entities or universities or systems or even role models so that people can craft new purpose for themselves? It's perhaps better informed by emotional intelligence. How do we make sure that people can be financially secure? And I would tell you that my 2 mentors were Maggie Kuhn and Bob Butler. And Maggie thought that we'd gotten lost in individualism. That independence when I grew up, we lived in the same home as my grandparents, and there was a boarder on the 3rd floor. My brother and I shared a bedroom. It was lovely. Yeah. Later on, the notion came along that everyone should have their own room, everybody should have their own house, their own website, their own, you know, Instagram, their own money, their own. And this individualism, I think, is going to be our downfall. I think interdependence and communality, and I don't mean by community just people like you, I mean the wonderful blend of who we are, will be part of our future, must be part of our future.
So I want to ask you one question, then we'll hopefully have a couple minutes to take some questions from the audience. both online if they have questions and in the room. So if we have mic runners, get ready. You mentioned some of the companies you worked with and done studies with. You recently did a study with Edward Jones called The New Age of Aging. And the headline for me was people, I think the way you did the poll, people 50 plus didn't think of 60 anymore as old age. They thought 80 was old age.
Well, let's do it right here. I want you to clap. I'm going to ask you when you think old age is. And I'm going to go 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90. So we'll do a poll.
Can we actually do an online poll for that too? Or is that, do we have to preload that? Preload, okay.
Well,
All
you
right.
can be entertained
They can-
watching what
yeah.
happens in the room. 60. How
Yes,
many
in
people
chat.
think old age begins at 60?
Oh, before you answer that, I turned 60 in July, this
All
past
right.
July. So be very careful.
Be kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, but see, there was ageism right there. He just made a joke about himself getting older versus I've never been so powerful, so knowledgeable. My perspective has never been so
That
seasoned.
too. Yeah.
But because we live in a world where we want people to think we're younger. So how many people would say old age begins at 60? Rick, clap your hands. 65. 70. 75, clap.
Maybe.
80.
All right.
85. 90. So between 80 and 85. And by the way, I've asked that question now of about 500,000 people, and it always comes back the same, unless I've got a group of elders in the room.
Well,
In which case,
if people in this room were 30 and you asked that question, how would it be different?
I think that what you asked me in the first question and you're asking me now is that I do think that younger people are more cognizant of older people than they've ever been before. And I think they're more likely to find themselves caregiving a grandparent or living with their parents still, or noticing that something terrible has happened to somebody, an uncle, a friend, a father of a friend, father of their spouse, mother of their spouse, that in this modern age, we shouldn't still have cancer. In this modern age, we shouldn't still have dementia. You know, I did a book with Jonas Salk when I was 30, and Jonas told me over dinner that in the 1940s, when poliomyelitis was rampant, people thought we needed more iron lungs. And what Jonas decided was, no, we need to end polio. Back to my very first point, we who are the power controllers need to organize and identify what are the 5 or 6 improvements that need to be made versus we're going to look into it or we're going to see what they did in order, and then get it done. I mean, there's a rape going on and we're watching. Shame on us. So, and it needs to be hopeful. If it's all about fear and terror, oh my goodness, you're getting old. You know, and I think, by the way, that last study we did on our own, Age Wave, I just wanted to be playful in it. And we asked people, when was the best time in your life? And we asked 5 generations. And 71% of people over 65 said it's either now or in front of me. Young people were worried about finances, their parents. They were home during COVID and they heard their mom and dad arguing about they didn't have money to pay bills. And all of a sudden they realized, oh, I thought parents kind of had it all together. They don't. The fact that we don't teach financial education in high school or grade school and wellness is nuts. I mean, it's nuts. We set people along their way and only 33% of our population has got a financial advisor, lucky them, but the rest of the population is just kind of bouncing off the walls.
Unless you're in Oregon, so let's.
Unless you're in Oregon, and I loved hearing about your program, but it ought to be, you know, call up Ron White and remind him when he was the Great Panther and tell him he ought to make it a national program. Because we need to make things that are important and can save lives national programs. We need to stop the crap already. Come on. I mean, yeah.
Okay, I want to, are there questions? Do you have a question from the online audience? We'll try to take
Not a
We're at
question.
0.
Yeah, I will just share though, my result of my informal poll.
Oh, nice.
Agreed 75 to 90 with a couple of comments of 10 years older than me.
Yeah. All right.
By the way, I'll play that on you in terms of language. Language really matters. If I hadn't seen, what is your name? Marina, if I hadn't seen you for 10 years and I said, good to see you, you're looking really young today, you'd thank me. If I said I hadn't seen you for 10 years, you're looking pretty old, it would break your heart. We have constructed a world where even our language is ageist. And we want to be younger because you'll think that we're better if we are. We need to flip that. We're entering into the most extraordinary age in human history where we're going to have, we already have 1 billion people over the age of 60 in the world. And as I said, nobody's tasked them with anything. And we're soon going to have 2 billion people over 60. If we don't figure out how to create the healthiest version of our long-lived people, if we don't, as Laura has done in her map of life, contemplate reinvention and back to school and giving, and if we don't think about purpose, we're going to create a mess. And it's already begun.
So what did you say to Terry Fulmer after you saw her for the first time in 46 years? Haven't changed a bit?
Well, she's tougher than she was. When she was a young gal, she was beautiful and well-informed, and she represented this geriatric nursing. We did a program that Ted Koppel moderated with Bob Butler, Terry, and me. And then we've occasionally interacted. And last year I did a PBS special called Sages of Aging, and Terry was in it. So we got the Zoom interview. But my sense is that Terry, different than many other of the Sages of Aging, is a bruiser. And she's in it to kind of make stuff happen. And I think that there's a certain degree of kindness and respectability and academic rapport that we hold at a higher level than saving lives. I mean, if you're in the financial industry, it's not about what new product you're creating, it's about the lives you're saving and the families you're saving and the communities you're saving. And if you're in the healthcare field, it's not about just, what do they call them when you got started? Gomers? Stood for get out of my emergency room. That there was like a dislike of older people, but they're the big consumers of health because they've got the problem. So we're kind of out of whack. And I realize I'm going off a little bit here. I know that, but
and I thank you for that. Yeah.
Well, it's like, come on,
yeah.
There's problems.
So
needs to be fixed.
Let's do this. We're quite usefully well beyond time and enjoyed it. Don't leave. We're going to take 2 questions and let's make it a lightning round. So Yohai, what's the first question?
Quick answers.
Yeah.
So the first question that comes from the online audience in different forms is, how do you see the solutions that are being implemented right now to deal with the big challenges of retirement, and what are some innovative solutions that you can think of?
I could give you 100 solutions that are terrific, but they're in this town or that county, or they're being tried out here, or they're getting funding that will end. And so the issue for me is not the absence of solutions. It's I started my career in the not-for-profit sector, and then I switched back and forth. So I work a lot in the for-profit sector, and scalability and growth are critical. So take the best projects and duplicate them around the country and give reason for them. It's fact-based. These are excellent. They're working well. They're lowering costs. So rather than mention a few great ones, which I could do, if we could sit here, I could mention, because I've seen so many great ones, but then they only go so far, or they get absorbed by some organization that sits on them. For example, I tried to create an elder corps when Clinton was president, and I had Jimmy Carter willing to run it. If Sergeant Shriver created a Peace Corps, why not create an elder corps? We got all these older people, got all these communities in need. Why not teach young people about money? Why not teach them about their bodies? Why not teach them about their purpose? Why not have older people deploy into our communities around the world? And, Clinton got into some trouble in the State of the Union speech when he was going to reveal our program. He didn't. And that was, 35 years ago. Duh.
So question from
I was not lightning enough.
you.
I'm sorry.
And while you're bringing the mic over there, we can actually do a little shout out for Experience Corps from AARP, which Sounds like it does some of the things that you were hoping to do.
Well, Experience Corps, begun by Mark and Linda Freed,
Yeah.
was brilliant.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. And, you know, turning it into changing the name around here and there, then you got AmeriCorps, and then you got this, and then you got that. Fernando Torres-Gil, who I think is the golden one in our field, would say that, you know, even though he was the first Undersecretary of Aging, if he looks up programs in LA and he was born and then he had polio, so he's disabled and he's brilliant, doctorate from Brandeis, he would say he can't figure out, it's like a big bowl of spaghetti. Is that our purpose, to have a lot of, you know, individual organizations striving for some funding, and then have some organizations that, you know, insurance players, some are not for profit, some are for profit, who are trying to make more money? Or are we trying to create healthy, well-adjusted, loving, loved, contributing, long-lived humans? We need a goal. And everybody knows what it is. Doesn't get mentioned. We have individual projects goals that get mentioned. But we have a challenge in front of us. I'm sorry.
That's all right. To that
Yes.
point, you've talked about the 49 years and all the different separate issues. How would you organize it? The national dialogue.
That's a tough question for a lightning round, but do your
I
best.
would seek out the most innovative thinkers, and many of them may not be in the field, and convince them that this is the biggest, this will be one of their legacy activities. I would, in their last breaths, they'll say, I'm most proud I was involved with that. So get Yuval Noah Harari from Israel, get Neil deGrasse Tyson, round them up. I would create an agenda like you're creating a game plan. And you can't cover, and you'd have major categories, and then you'd have minor categories under them. And I would find, you know, it's what McKinsey does. What are the best practices? Where's it going best? I identify them, and then I would map them out, and it would have to take a lot of persuasion. But you know, when I was, for the short time that I was practicing psychotherapist, I came to realize that most people wanted to be different, but nobody wanted to change. So how do you get people to change? Persuasion, facts, ideas. It'll be okay. You can do this. But we better get on with it, or else we're going to be getting together here 10 years from now. Laura and I will have more gray hair, but we'll still be talking about this project, that project. We need to look into it. We need to think about it. I mean, we've got, when I hear the numbers of finance, you know, when I hear that the average person on night of retirement, the median person, it took me a while to understand the difference. Average is not the number you want, because Bill Gates lives in your town. Everybody's average, you know, goes sky high. The median is $134,000. Get a load of this. The out-of-pocket healthcare costs in our shitty healthcare system, it's $550,000 for the average couple in retirement for health and long-term care. Who's going to pay for that? We all know these numbers. Or if we don't, they ought to be gathered together, not in 108, you know, when President Obama, who I was massively fond of and have presented with, put out a 2,000-page document. People don't read 2,000 pages. Simple, clear, with pictures, and then a path, and then leadership. And we need leadership. And we're a celebritocracy, I've come to be dismayed over, that many of you in great institutions, people in your institutions may know you, but they don't know you anywhere else. How do we get people who have power and influence to write the op-ed piece for the New York Times? How do we get power and influence to ask the question at presidential debates? How do we get people of power and influence to create, you know, I hear more people talking about Dan Buettner since his series ran than anybody in the aging field.
Well, he did get on Netflix, which is transforms everything.
So how do we sit down with the people that are planning Netflix and have them realize that they could play a part in doing good?
Well, let's invite him here for the next Century Summit next year. So Ken Dychtwald, thank you for what a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.